Number 1. So my girlfriend has a younger sister who has cerebral palsy and autism, and although she's very smart, she can't really support herself fully and will probably need help and guidance for the rest of her life, which is perfectly okay. She's basically our adopted sister. My girlfriend taught her sister how to walk and talk and basically everything she knows. One day though, my girlfriend told me how there were 3 instances in her life where her sister basically broke character and told her how she was stuck and couldn't get out and that she was trapped and needed help desperately. Her sister talks in a very specific, kiddish and cutesy way. She's very innocent and to this day, at 19 years old, she talks to her stuffed animals like as if they were real. During the 3 times where she broke character, my girlfriend told me her sister spoke in a certain desperate and adult tone and made a face like she was scared for her life. And literally the next second, her face would change and she would go back to the way that she was before. And my girlfriend told me it would be like her sister didn't remember what had just happened moments before. To this day, it scares her, and it makes her wonder what if her sister is trapped in a childlike state, and sometimes has moments of clarity. I'm not sure. But when she told me, I could tell it was serious, and she has never brought it up ever since because of how much it creeps her out. Sometimes I get worried that one day she might break character, and only I will be around, and I won't know what to do. She's very sweet and we love her just the way she is, but it creeps me out to think, what if her mind was being held hostage by another? By the way, this is Dark Case, and yes, I am a human being. There is no AI voices here. You can join the Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now. I'm currently on the road to 250,000 subscribers, that's 250,000, which is crazy. So if you're not yet subscribed, please do hit that button to help me along the way. Or even join the inner circle over on Patreon, just like these legends that you're seeing on screen right now. I'm going to be sharing a carefully curated selection of stories, all of which are presented as being the very real experiences from the people of the internet. I think it's time for me to try some slightly different things for you all, and this just feels right. I loved finding these true tales, and they've given me that weird feeling in my gut. So please do let me know what you think about this new style of video down in the comments. But on with the video. Number 2. My classmate claimed she could shapeshift 20 years later, and I still believe her. I've spent 2/3 of my life trying to debunk this one or come up with a reasonable explanation. When I was in 5th grade, I rode the bus with a girl who was a grade or 2 below me. We lived on opposite sides of a rather large apartment complex, but we could still walk to each other's homes. Let's call her Mika. Mika was born in Romania, and she'd moved here a few years prior to me meeting her. She had heterochromia. Mika had brown eyes, but half of one of them was blue. This is relevant later. Her family was off. I went over to her apartment a few times to hang out with her and remembered seeing a lot of unusual decor in her home. Lots of candles, a few altars, and a lot of taxidermy. Her mother would get very upset any time she brought any friends over, so typically she would sneak myself and a few of our other friends in any time her mom was out shopping. My mom was pregnant at the time and often felt sick, so I never brought my friends over unless she was out shopping or at the doctor's. She had never met Mika. A lot of the other kids were scared of her or felt uneasy around her. None of our mutual friends could explain why. I did too at times for some unknown reason, but as a fellow outcast, we stuck by each other's sides. After a few months of knowing each other, she started telling me that her family followed a belief system similar to paganism. I forget exactly what she called their religion, but it wasn't Wicca, pagan, or any other common, for lack of a better word, spiritual belief system. Mika started claiming she had special powers. I immediately called bull, and I told her to prove it. She responded by saying that she would shapeshift into a cat and visit me later that evening. My family and I lived on the third floor of our apartment building. There were no fire escapes, balconies, or anything like that. We barely even had window ledges. As a side note, I loved cute stuff. Hello Kitty, Care Bears, My Little Pony, all that good stuff. My best friend at the time was very into fashion and loved to act like a high schooler. The few times she saw me in cartoon PJs, she made jokes. So I stopped wearing anything like that to school or sleepovers almost a full year prior to meeting Mika. I went to bed at my normal bedtime of 9:30. I was wearing some Care Bear pajamas that my mom had bought me a week prior. Nobody had seen me in them aside from my parents. Around 3 a.m. that night, I woke up to hear scratching at my window. I jumped out of bed, looked out my window, and saw a black cat staring directly at me. The cat was sitting on the very thin window ledge, and it raised its paw at me as if it was waving at me. Freaked out, I told myself it was a dream, and I went back to sleep. Later that morning, while my mom was cooking breakfast, she asked if I had heard anything weird outside the night before. I asked what she meant. I saw the weirdest thing last night. I heard scratching at my window. I got up to see what it was, and saw a black cat on the window ledge. It looked like it was trying to open my window. I sat there in silence, unsure of what to say. My mom continued. I was afraid it was going to fall, so I brought it inside, carried it downstairs, and put it outside. You should have seen its eyes. It had one eye that was half blue. I've never seen a cat like that before. I felt so sick I couldn't speak or finish my breakfast. So, not wanting to approach Mika after all this, I stood off to the side away from all the other kids until she walked up to me. Hey, Gloomy Bear, why didn't you let me in last night? I was stunned. I could have died. At least your mom was nice enough to take me downstairs. I stopped hanging around her as much after that. Our building caught on fire a few weeks after all this happened, and we ended up moving a few towns away. I haven't seen or heard from her since. To this day, my mom still remembers the cat. She'll mention it in passing every few years, and make comments about how weird it was that a cat could have gotten up on that ledge. For the last 20 years now, I've been racking my brain looking for an explanation. If anyone has one, I'd love to hear it. Number 3. This is the first time I'm actually writing about this. So, when I was 13, my older brother, 18, and I were on our way to a movie when we were hit by a drunk driver. I woke up in hospital 4 days later, having lost my right leg. My other leg was in a cast, along with other injuries. That night, I woke up to my brother sitting by my bed, telling me everything will be okay, and to go back to sleep. The next day, my parents come to visit and see how I was doing. I asked why my brother wasn't with them, and they looked at each other but didn't say anything. That night, I again woke up to my brother sitting by my bed again, telling me he knows I can get through this and I need to be strong and overcome this and not let my injuries stop me from living life. We talked a bit, him not answering specific questions, but answering more general questions. I remember asking him why he was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, because that was very unlike him to wear anything similar to what he wore the day before. He didn't answer that, but when I asked how he was, he said better than he thought he would be, given the circumstances. He reminded me to be strong and keep living and not let anything stop me, and how much he loved me, before telling me I should get some more sleep. The next day, my parents again came to visit me in hospital, and I again asked why my brother wasn't with them, and once again they looked at each other, and it was only after I said that I would like a family visit together and not at different times, and would like my brother to visit during the day when we can talk more, instead of at night, that my dad asked what I meant. So I told him Andy had been coming at night to visit. My mom broke down and left the room. My dad then told me that was impossible because Andy died in the accident instantly. I didn't believe it and argued, and I ended up having to be sedated. That night I had no visit, and the next day my parents brought a newspaper article about the accident. Years later, my fiancée had an experience, and having never seen a photo of my brother, she described him to a T and what he was wearing. That is a story for another time, but it was nice knowing Andy is still around and looking out for me and those I love. Of course, we want to find out what happened next, so this is continued in the next story. Number 4. Since people asked on my last post, I got permission from my fiancée to share this. Something to note before getting into what happened. My brother died when I was 13 and we were both in a car accident. My fiancée never met my brother. She'd never seen photos of him before this. My fiancée is bipolar, extreme highs and extreme lows. We'd been dating for 4 months at the time and just moved in together. I didn't know at the time, but she had gone off her meds. This all happened while I was at work and she told me about it later. She went out for a walk to get some air because she was feeling really claustrophobic, the start of a manic depressive episode. It got to the point where she thought dying would be the best option, and standing at the corner, she thought the best idea would be to just walk into traffic. As she took a step off the curb, someone grabbed her and pulled her back and turned her around into a hug. Their arms wrapped around her, telling her she doesn't truly want to do this, that everything will be okay, that she is stronger than she realizes, and it isn't her time. They told her just to breathe nice, slow, deep breaths. She looked up at him and said thanks. She turned around to wipe her eyes, and when she turned back, the person was gone. She told me all about this when I got off work, and she wanted to put a post up online to see if she could find a guy to say a proper thank you for his help and for saving her. It was when she started saying what he told her and describing him that my heart started beating faster. I knew who helped her. She described him as being 17 to 18 years old, athletic, slightly taller than her, dark brown shaggy hair, a big freckle birthmark under his eye, with a blue shirt that said JS Jenks in yellow letters. It brought me back to the visits I got in the hospital, the shirt my brother wore on the day of his accident, and when I saw him by my hospital bed. I told her I knew who helped her, and I couldn't explain it. I told her it was my brother, and she said it was impossible. It was a real person. She got mad at me for suggesting it, because she never believed in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. Very skeptic. I asked her to please trust me, and that night we drove to my parents' house, and I went into the basement and found a picture of my brother, and I asked if that was who helped her, and her face went pale, and kept asking how it was possible. I had no idea what to say because I didn't know either, but I told her how he came to me in my time of need, and it looks like he came to her in her time of need. Still crazy to think about, and definitely I can't explain it. Number 5. So, I'm a long-time reader, first-time poster, so forgive me if my story isn't really that detailed or intriguing. A few years ago when I was 16 or 17, I worked in a restaurant as a waitress. There were 2 locations, one in my town, which I'll call Restaurant A, and one in a town about 30 minutes away, Restaurant B. I should mention that Restaurant B is located in a rougher area, and many of my co-workers weren't from the best of backgrounds. Nonetheless, they were sweet people, and I trusted them. I was trusted as a manager on Thursdays at Restaurant B, which usually meant I was the cashier, server, manager, and the only other person would be a cook, which I'll call Dave. In the restaurant, there is a front glass door that the customers use, and a back wooden door with no window that we use to take out the trash and such. One day, we had no business, and I was in the kitchen with Dave and another cook who was about to leave. We were standing around talking, with Dave right in front of the back door, and the other cook to the side of the door, and me about 5 feet away from Dave in line with the door. He had a bag of trash in his hand, and he was going to take it out. He opened the door while still facing me and talking, and behind the door was a person. It was clearly a person in a grey t-shirt, jeans, and a black hat. I saw him for a split second, long enough to know someone was there, and then Dave saw my face and turned around. But this blocked my view, and then the guy was gone. The other cook saw my face turn white as a sheet when David opened the door, and he joked that I looked like I'd just seen a ghost. Oh, the irony. While Dave started looking around outside to see what I could have seen, I started actually panicking. I have severe anxiety and panic disorder. Dave was trying to calm me down, but he also seemed really freaked out. He asked me what I'd seen. I told him I saw someone. I described the person, and what he told me next will never leave me. Dave started crying and ran out the door with his phone in his hand. He was outside for nearly half an hour, and when he came back in, he was calmer, but still nervous. He told me that roughly 10 years ago, he and his friend were in a horrible car accident, which ended in his friend passing. He told me the person I described standing outside of the door was wearing the exact outfit that his friend had passed away in. And apparently, I wasn't the first person to see the ghost of his friend. Dave told me that whenever something were to happen to anyone in his family, his friend would show up. For example, one time he saw the ghost of his friend, and literally a minute later his phone rang, and he found out his father had just suffered a massive heart attack. When he had run out of the door, he was calling his family to make sure that everyone was okay, and luckily they were. But not even 2 days later, he found out his wife had miscarried. As if that wasn't weird enough, the same night I saw the ghost, something else weird happened that I believe was paranormal, but I also understand it could have been paranoia. I was up front at the register, still shaken up, and a huge crow was hovering outside of the front door. It was so weird. It literally was just flying in place. It suddenly flew away, and then a really strange-looking man approached the door, and they opened it wide, but didn't enter. He had the creepiest smile on his face the entire time. Moments later, the crow was back, and it almost came in the restaurant, but another customer swatted it away. The man literally turned around and left, didn't order anything, and didn't say a word. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I'm just hoping that someone reads this and understands that what I went through is real. Everyone I know doesn't believe in the paranormal, and they think that I was just imagining things. Number 6. I've been to heaven before. I've changed all names for obvious reasons. Quick background, when I was younger, I was a very sick child, constantly in and out of hospital. At 2.5, I contracted pertussis encephalopathy, basically an infection to the brain. I was having seizure after seizure. My siblings were brought in to say goodbye to me before I was transported to another hospital. They were told they'd never see me again. On the way in the ambulance, my heart stopped 3 times. The third, they thought they'd lost me, but managed to bring me back after a few minutes. My parents were told I had a 50-50 chance, but that if I lived, I'd be in a vegetative state. Spoiler alert, I was neither and managed to come out of it absolutely fine. The doctors said they never saw anyone come out of what I did, and to this day they talk about it when I see them. But here's where it gets weird. Fast forward to when I'm 3, fully recovered, and we as a family are going through family photos. I point out one of my grandmother, who died years before I was born, and said, "There's Nanny Collins." My family was shocked because there's no photos of her around the house, and I'd never been shown one. There was no way I knew what she looked like. Curious, they asked me, "How do you know that?" And I replied, I was up in her house, playing with Anne. They ask if it was my cousin Annie, who's my age, and I tell them no, not Annie, Anne. At this point, they're freaked out. My cousin Annie is named after her Aunt Anne, and she passed when she was just 18 months. There is no way I knew about this because she passed 30 years before this incident. And then I said the thing that struck them most. I told them I was playing with Anne and her toys, but Nanny Collins told me I had to go home to Mummy and Daddy, that I wasn't ready to stay here yet. I truly believe I passed, went to whatever kind of afterlife there is, but my grandmother saved me. It explains how I came out of what I did, when my chances were literally death or living dead. For a few years after this, I still spoke of my Nanny Collins and told my family that whenever I was sad, she would come and cheer me up. I would go to her grave and talk to her as if we were having conversations. Then, one day, I told them that she said I didn't need her anymore, and after that day, I never spoke of her again. I truly believe my nanny was there for me through my tough childhood years. I sadly don't remember any of these things, and I suspect she stopped showing to me when I was old enough to remember. I wish I did remember, but all my family members do, and even my aunts and uncles talk about this and how I spoke about her all the time. So, Nanny Collins, thank you for saving my life. Number 7. We met a missing person on a camping trip. Been lurking here for a few months, but decided to tell my story finally. My family and I were from Oakland, California. It was 2012, and when I was 16, my brother was 12, and my parents were both in their mid-50s. One summer, we were on a road trip and ended up camping in the mountains above Lander, Wyoming. I remember sitting in the back seat behind my dad who was driving. We were on a dirt road above Sinks Canyon, and all of the windows were open. It was July and very nice out. We pulled over by the turnout to one of the lakes to the right of us to look at the map. My parents weren't sure how to get to the campground on the other end of the several-mile road. About this time, a young lady came jogging from the other direction. I remember she was blonde, had on a yellow tank top and dark shorts. My dad waved out the window to her and called her over. He explained that we were lost and asked her if she knew the area. Sure do. If you keep following this, and she motioned towards the road in front of us, it will take you to Louis Lake. The campgrounds are going to be on your left. We thanked her, and she said her name was Amy. Anyway, a few years later, I saw an episode of Disappeared. It featured a runner who'd gone missing in the late 1990s outside of Lander, Wyoming, and who had never been found. When they showed her name, Amy Bechtel, and her photo, the hairs on my neck immediately stood up. It was her. When we saw her, she appeared the same age, and she was wearing the same clothes described in the program. I showed my dad a few days later, but he didn't remember the specifics that I did. He remembered her being named Amy, but thought I was just imagining things. My brother was asleep when this happened and my mom had no comment. But 5 years later, I know what I saw. It was Amy. Number 8. Anyone else met people that don't seem entirely human? When I was in 6th grade, there was this girl at school. I'll call her Nellie. She was the popular girl and had a million friends, and tons of boys that liked her too. There was something about her though that just wasn't right. She had this weird influence over everyone, including the adults and teachers. She was way too aware for her age and knew how to get around things and manipulate people that were way older than her. She seemed to know how to legitimately read minds as well. I remember once thinking a specific thought while walking close to her, and she responded aloud to what I was thinking, as if I'd actually said something. I know for a fact I didn't. I remember I was so shocked I just stood there in awe, not knowing what to say. She definitely had some strange psychic abilities, and she could force people to do things against their will just by thinking about it. She had the most amazing luck I've ever seen on anyone. She got whatever she wanted, no matter how unlikely. And she seemed to draw luck away from everyone else. All her close friends and people she spent time with had terrible issues. 2 of her best friends' moms got cancer, 1 died, another broke her foot, and similar things happened to her other friends too. For the brief time I was her friend, I had 2 infections, once in my eye after she complimented me on my colored contacts, and 1 in my ear after she noticed my new earrings. I remember she was very beautiful, but her older brother was very unattractive and appeared almost to have stunted growth. They were close and spent a lot of time together. I remember one instance where she got something she wanted that was very improbable. A speaker came to our school and was going to give away a special prize to just 1 of the 3,000 kids at our school. We were all in the library waiting to hear who would win. I was watching Nellie and I saw her with this weird expression on her face, like she was concentrating really, really hard. Immediately, the speaker drew a name from a hat and he called her name. Nellie had won. She didn't even look surprised when she went to collect her prize. It was very creepy and unnerving. She had this weird effect on people where even if you didn't like her, you wanted to do anything for her. I've never seen anything like it in my 17 years on this earth. I've met many popular girls, but none like her. I've not seen her in nearly 7 years. We were only 11 at the time, but she was like an adult in a child's body. She knew everything that would happen and knew exactly what to say in order to make you do something for her. She did not seem entirely human to me. Almost like she was something else, masquerading as a middle schooler. She had a deep, almost adult voice, and she did not think like a child. I first met her in 4th grade, and even back then she was so incredibly advanced that she had an entourage of friends, a boyfriend, and other things that one normally does not have until middle or high school. She knew things in 4th grade about psychology and human nature that I didn't learn until recently. I've never seen someone so adept at controlling and manipulating people at such a young age. Does anyone else have similar experiences with people that don't seem totally human? Number 9. Super creepy experience I had in the shower. So this happened to me about 5 years ago, during which time I was working at an after-school music studio teaching private lessons. The building I worked in was an old walk-up, one of the oldest buildings in town, and supposedly haunted, according to my boss. Almost all of my co-workers had had really strange experiences late at night at the studio, while closing up or on their own. I had had some pretty strange experiences as well, hearing people fiddling around with the piano when there was no one in the room, hearing footsteps and people talking when I was the only one there, and stuff like that. I've always been sensitive to these things, so it actually didn't freak me out that much. I just assumed it was some spirit or energy that was still in the building, and I ignored it most of the time. However, one night I had just finished my last lesson of the evening, and I was closing up. I was the last teacher there, and there was something very eerie about the feeling in the building that night. I felt as if somebody was genuinely in the room with me and was watching my every move. I got my stuff and hustled out of the building as quickly as I could. Driving back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the car with me. I had never felt that before, but I felt as if whatever was in that building felt lonely or something, and it had now attached itself to me. As usual, I shook it off and tried not to think about it for the rest of the night. The next morning, my boyfriend had left for work early as usual at around 6 a.m, and I got up later in the morning, 8:30, to get ready for my day. I stepped into the shower and immediately I felt this person's presence so strongly. This thought pops into my head. This person is in here watching me shower. I know that sounds insane, but I felt their presence so intensely. So out loud, I decided to yell, "Please leave me alone." Immediately, I heard my front door slam. Not my bathroom door, my front door. And I no longer felt the spirit's presence. I finished my shower, dried off, and decided to look at my front door entrance, and I saw the scariest thing I've ever seen. 2 wet footprints right in front of the front door. And this really did happen to me, and I've been trying to reason it away and find logical explanations, but nothing has made sense so far. I genuinely believe that this spirit got a little too close for comfort, and it decided to pop in the shower with me that morning.